worked on the theory of phonetic alternations, what is now called allophony and morphophonology, and may have had an influence on the work of Saussure. According to E.F.K. Corner, an influential school of phonology in the interwar period was the Prague School. One of its leading members was Prince Nikolai Trubetskoy, whose Grundzüge der Phonologie, Principles of Phonology, published posthumously in 1939, is among the most important works in the field from this period. Directly influenced by Baudouin de Courtenay, Trubetskoy is considered the founder of morphophonology, although this concept had also been recognized by de Courtenay. Trubetskoy also developed the concept of the archiphoneme. Another important figure in the Prague school was Roman Jakobson, who was one of the most prominent linguists of the 20th century. In 1968, Noam Chomsky and Maurice Halley published The Sound Pattern of English (SPE), the basis for generative phonology. In this view, phonological representations are sequences of segments made up of distinctive features. These features were an expansion of earlier work by Roman Jakobson, Gunnar Fand, and Maurice Halley. The features describe aspects of articulation and perception, are from a universally fixed set, and have the binary values plus or minus. There are at least two levels of representation: underlying representation and surface phonetic representation. Ordered phonological rules govern how underlying representation is transformed into the actual pronunciation, the so-called surface form. An important consequence of the influence SPE had on phonological theory was the downplaying of the syllable, and the emphasis on segments. Furthermore, the generativists folded morphophonology into phonology, which both solved and created problems. Natural phonology is a theory based on the publications of its proponent, David Stamp, in 1969 and, more explicitly, in 1979. In this view, phonology is based on a set of universal phonological processes that interact with one another. Which ones are active and which are suppressed is language specific. Rather than acting on segments, phonological processes act on distinctive features within prosodic groups. Prosodic groups can be as small as a part of a syllable or as large as an entire utterance. Phonological processes are unordered with respect to each other and apply simultaneously, though the output of one process may be the input to another. The second most prominent natural phonologist is Patricia Donegan, Stamp's wife. There are many natural phonologists in Europe, and a few in the U.S., such as Jeffrey Nathan. The principles of natural phonology were extended to morphology by Wolfgang U. Dressler, who founded natural morphology. In 1976, John Goldsmith introduced autosegmental phonology. Phonological phenomena are no longer seen as operating on one linear sequence of segments, called phonemes or feature combinations, but rather as involving some parallel sequences of features which reside on multiple tiers. Autosegmental phonology later evolved into feature geometry, which became the standard theory of representation for theories of the organization of phonology as different as lexical phonology and optimality theory. Government phonology, which originated in the early 1980s as an attempt to unify theoretical notions of syntactic and phonological structures, is based on the notion that all languages necessarily follow a small set of principles and vary according to their selection of certain binary parameters. That is, all languages' phonological structures are essentially the same, but there is restricted variation that accounts for differences in surface realizations. Principles are held to be inviolable, though parameters may sometimes come into conflict. Prominent figures in this field include Jonathan Kay, Jean Lowenstam, Jean-Roger Vergniaud, Monique Charette, and John Harris. In a course at the LSA Summer Institute in 1991, Alan Prince and Paul Smolensky developed optimality theory, an overall architecture for phonology according to which languages choose a pronunciation of a word that best satisfies a list of constraints ordered by importance. A lower-ranked constraint can be violated when the violation is necessary in order to obey a higher-ranked constraint. The approach was soon extended to morphology by John McCarthy and Alan Prince, and has become a dominant trend in phonology. The appeal to phonetic grounding of constraints and representational elements, e.g. features, in various approaches has been criticized by proponents of substance-free phonology, especially by Mark Hale and Charles Rees. An integrated approach to phonological theory that combines synchronic and diachronic accounts to sound patterns was initiated with evolutionary phonology in recent years. Analysis of phonemes. An important part of traditional pre-generative schools of phonology is studying which sounds can be grouped into distinctive units within a language. These units are known as phonemes. For example, in English, the P sound in pod is aspirated, pronounced, while that in spot is not aspirated, pronounced. However, English speakers intuitively treat both sounds as variations, allophones, of the same phonological category, that is, of the phoneme P. Traditionally, it would be argued that if an aspirated were interchanged with the unaspirated in spot, native speakers of English would still hear the same words, that is, the two sounds are perceived as the same P. In some other languages, however, these two sounds are perceived as different, and they are consequently assigned to different phonemes. For example, in Thai, Hindi, and Quechua, there are minimal pairs of words for which aspiration is the only contrasting feature. Two words can have different meanings, but with the only difference in pronunciation being that one has an aspirated sound where the other has an unaspirated one. Part of the phonological study of a language, therefore, involves looking at data, phonetic transcriptions of the speech of native speakers, and trying to deduce what the underlying phonemes are and what the sound inventory of the language is. The presence or absence of minimal pairs, as mentioned above, is a frequently used criterion for deciding whether two sounds should be assigned to the same phoneme. However, other considerations often need to be taken into account as well. The particular contrasts which are phonemic in a language can change over time. At one time, and two sounds that have the same place and manner of articulation and differ in voicing only were allophones of the same phoneme in English, but later came to belong to separate phonemes. This is one of the main factors of historical change of languages as described in historical linguistics. The findings and insights of speech perception and articulation research complicate the traditional and somewhat intuitive idea of interchangeable allophones being perceived as the same phoneme. First, interchanged allophones of the same phoneme can result in unrecognizable words. Second, actual speech, even at a word level, is highly co-articulated, so it is problematic to expect to be able to splice words into simple segments without affecting speech perception. Different linguists, therefore, take different approaches to the problem of assigning sounds to phonemes. For example, they differ in the extent to which they require allophones to be phonetically similar. There are also differing ideas as to whether this grouping of sounds is purely a tool for linguistic analysis, or reflects an actual process in the way the human brain processes a language. Since the early 1960s, theoretical linguists have moved away from the traditional concept of a phoneme, preferring to consider basic units at a more abstract level, as a component of morphemes. These units can be called morphophonemes. An analysis using this approach is called morphophonology. Other topics in phonology, in addition to the minimal units that can serve the purpose of differentiating meaning, the phonemes. Phonology studies how sounds alternate, i.e. replace one another in different forms of the same morpheme, allomorphs, as well as, for example, syllable structure, stress, feature geometry, accent, and intonation. Phonology also includes topics such as phonotactics, the phonological constraints on what sounds can appear in what positions in a given language, and phonological alternation, how the pronunciation of a sound changes through the application of phonological rules, sometimes in a given order, which can be feeding or bleeding, as well as prosody, the study of suprasegmentals, and topics such as stress and intonation. The principles of phonological analysis can be applied independently of modality because they are designed to serve as general analytical tools, not language-specific ones. The same principles have been applied to the analysis of sign languages. See phonemes in sign languages. Even though the sublexical units are not instantiated as speech sounds, semantics from ancient Greek, semantikos, significant is the linguistic and philosophical study of meaning in language, programming languages, formal logics, and semi semiotics. It is concerned with a relationship between signifiers, like words, phrases, signs, and symbols, and what they stand for in reality, their denotation. In international scientific vocabulary, semantics is also called semasiology. The word semantics was first used by Michel Briel, a French philologist. It denotes a range of ideas, from the popular to the highly technical. It is often used in ordinary language for denoting a problem of understanding that comes down to word selection or connotation. This problem of understanding has been the subject of many formal inquiries over a long period of time, especially in the field of formal semantics. In linguistics, it is the study